What's up everybody, and welcome back to the Australian Comic League YouTube channel. My name is Jaden as always, and thank you for joining me on another episode. And on today's episode, I'd love to talk about something a little more on the controversial side, but I think it's something which I bring up quite a lot with other people, and I think it's worth a little bit of discussion. And that is why I'm not crazy about online comic book price guides. Before we get into that though, guys, I would love to hear from you if you have a few books you would like to sell, a large collection you would like to sell, or even just one or two books. Hit me up on my email here. I'm always buying, always looking to create fair deals which work for both the buyer and yourself. If that is something that you would be interested in, I would love to hear from you. You can reach out on my email, or you can feel free to hit me up at the Instagram at Australian Comic League. All right, with all that being said and done, guys, as I said, today's topic of discussion is going to be online comic book price guides, specifically ones which take internet data such as Go Collect, GPA analysis, and things of that nature. And I'm not the biggest fan of these, and I'm going to get into why in a sec. But before I do want to, of course, mention the benefit of having these resources and who they can actually help in what sort of circumstance. Now, online comic book price guides such as Go Collect, GPA, things of that nature. Absolutely phenomenal tools when it comes to helping out new collectors who want a guide as to what their book may be worth. Fantastic. Let's say you know nothing about the comic book hobby. Online comic book price guides are a fantastic way to quickly and fairly find out a ballpark price for your collectible to make sure that you're not getting ripped off if you do want to move something across. Or let's say you've inherited some books and you don't know what their value is, then it is fantastic to use these as a resource to get a ballpark figure regarding your valuation. Now, obviously, with that all said, the other impact that these comic book price guides have had in terms of the benefits of them is, in my opinion, they are fantastic for finding out hard to find values for comic books which do not sell on a day-to-day basis. Let's say you have a 1951 Golden Age comic book, and let's say that it sells maybe once a year, once every 6 months, maybe 4 months. It can be incredibly hard sometimes to find the last sale and some data for books that only sell once or twice a year, or maybe 3 or 4 times. That is where these services come with great reward, in that you can pinpoint sales for books which otherwise you would not be able to find on something like eBay sold listing. It may be incredibly hard to find the last sold listing on auction house pages. Perhaps they don't go that far back. I know that eBay listings, I believe, go 3 months. So let's say that a very hard to find book sold 6 months ago and you want to pinpoint the sale down. Online price guides are a fantastic way to do that. You can actually have a look at the exact date a book sold years ago. So in terms of the bookkeeping, these sites are fantastic, especially when it comes to books which don't sell that often. Why then would I be saying that I'm not the biggest fan of comic book price guides in my anecdotal experience? And I have a few reasons, which all kind of lie around the same trend. The first very important reason to consider is the variable in visibility. For a lot of books, especially books which perhaps only have 2 or 3 sales in a 90-day, 30-day, 6-month, year period. Let's say that a book has sold. The problem that I experience with online price guides is simply that they take into consideration too many different variable sales and then take the average of the lot. So, first of all, I'm talking about foot traffic. So, these sites will take into consideration the grade that that comic book sold across a plethora of different comic book online venues, which is fantastic in terms of getting a diverse figure. The problem with it is that the foot traffic that a book sells on one platform will vary significantly in some circumstances to the foot traffic in which the same book will sell on another platform. Let's say that a book sells on Heritage Auctions. It has a nice sale. Heritage Auctions is a website which people will fluctuate to when they're going for especially a bigger comic book. It is a well-known, well-regarded, well-trusted site. Fantastic. However, what if that same comic book sells a month later on a different auction website which is listed under these online comic book price guides and it sells for significantly less and it did not have the same visibility, does that comic book then mean that the comic book which sold with less visibility in terms of the foot traffic on the website, does that mean that that comic book is worth less than the one that sold on heritage auctions the month or two before? I don't think so. And similarly, on the same line of visibility, I want to add in not only just the selling venue, but the time that it was listed for and the opportunity in which buyers had the opportunity to view the book and make an informed decision as to whether they wanted to bid or buy it. Let's say, for example, someone lists a book on eBay for 24 hours. It sells at auction. Obviously, in a 24-hour eBay auction, the time that it will take for someone to make a decision about whether they want to bid on the book is reduced, and the visibility that online buyers will have to actually see the item at hand is heavily reduced. Now, that sale in 99% of circumstances is going to go for under fair market value due to those two reasons: the visibility and the time it was up. Let's say that in a 90-day average, there's only been 2 sales for a comic book. Let's say that one of them was a buy it now for the perceived fair market value of a comic book. And let's say that one was 2 weeks later for a 24-hour auction on eBay for that same comic book in the same grade. The issue that I have with this is that these online comic book price guides will take the average of both for the 90-day average. And in my opinion, that does not speak to the true value of the book. Rather, it's taking circumstantial data from sales which did not have the same level of visibility and were under different circumstances and taking the average of the two, which will of course be far lower than that one which sold 2 weeks earlier for the buy it now price in this hypothetical. Does that mean that after a bin sale for a comic book sold for $800, does that mean for the 2 weeks before that comic book sells in the second auction for 24 hours for $400, that the value of that comic book, according to these comic book price guides, is $800? And then immediately after that comic book sells for $400 on the 24-hour auction, does that then mean that it is reasonable to assume that the day after that, the comic book is worth 25% less when you divide the two sales at $600? That's something to think about, and I don't think so. Because then the comic book price guide will show that the average is $600. So does that mean that the person who bought the book online 2 days earlier in a private sale, when someone brought up the analysis of the average and it said 800, does that mean then they overpaid if they spent 800? Because the next day it's 600 because there was a 24-hour auction that sold for $400, far under the market value. But now the comic book price guide says 600. Does that mean that the person now lost 25% of their money? I don't think so. And that is the problem that I have with comic book price guides, is the circumstantial events that can lead to big dips in values and big influxes in values is too circumstantial, and they don't take into consideration the variables in visibility and time listed when taking into consideration the average. So in a similar vein, let's say that a book sells on heritage auctions and has a strong sale. Let's say that this book then sells the next day on an auction house which isn't as widely circulated as heritage auctions. Same thing. The average goes down. So then someone looking at this to buy it privately online may say, well, the average is now this. That means the book is worth that. But the day before, the perceived value of the book, due to it having different foot traffic on the sales, was significantly more. So I think that there is a lot to take into consideration if you're using comic book price guides in this way, to look at where the book sold and then do some investigation as to why the book finished as low or high as it did. And I think that is a much stronger way to use these comic book price guides to your advantage, rather than just simply looking at an average on a given day. Because if then the book sells at another buy it now sale a week later, let's say that the person who looked at the average for 600 in my example before, for the 800 and 400 sale, they're now saying it's worth 600. The seller may compromise and say, okay, the book is now worth $600 after that low 24-hour sale. Then next week, there is a buy it now sale for $900, which is closer to the $800 buy it now sale originally. That means now that average shoots back up. Does that mean that the seller got ripped off the week before? That's the problem. In my opinion, the strong way to use comic book price guides is in the word. It is a guide. And the brilliant thing about these guides, guys, is that you can look at where the comic sold and what type of sale it was. And that, in my opinion, will give you a far more accurate indication as to why the value of a comic book says it is the value at any given time on an average. And in my opinion, it is a much stronger way to go about things than looking at an average. And that is why I'm not the biggest fan about comic book price guides online when it comes to simply taking them at face value and looking at an average. Thank you guys for watching the video. I think the smartest way just to use comic book price guides is it's in the word. It's a comic book price guide. You know, it's not a Bible, it's a guide and an estimation in a roundabout ballpark figure as to what something is worth. And at the end of the day, if you want to buy something, guys, at the end of the day, you may be willing to spend a little bit more. And I think that that's totally fine. I wouldn't recommend missing out on items due to comic book price guides, not 100% marrying up with what you would like to put into the book. I think that's a mistake which a lot of people make. And you can miss out on some really good books, especially ones that don't come up every day of the week. Guys, thank you for watching the video. I hope you took something out of it. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.